China.
Welcome to our meeting. It is 5:30 on Thursday, the 16th of June, and we are glad you're all here. We are meeting in the boardroom on Legacy Campus, and we will have roll call starting with Jared.
Jared Black, Business Administrator.
Chris Corcoran, Board Member.
Kathy Christiansen, Board Member.
Terry Rhodes, Board Member.
Roger Pulse, Board Member.
Steve Norton, Superintendent.
Randall Bagley, Board Member.
Larry Jepson, Board Member.
And Jeff Nielsen, Board Member, is excused. We will have the pledge led by Chris Corcoran, and then the mission statement. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our mission is to prepare students. Oh, oops! I just had a brain cramp. Prepare students for.
Educate students.
Educate students for a changing world.
For success.
For success in a changing world.
You've got an assignment before the next meeting.
Thank you. I need to do some memorization.
Next up on our agenda is public input. We have one person who has requested to speak, and I have to remind you that comments are limited to 3 minutes. Personnel comments are prohibited. Comments are recorded as part of the public record, and we would expect you to please be respectful. So we will hear from Heather Mueller.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm just a mom of, just had a graduated senior from Skyview, and I have a 10th grader at Skyview. I homeschooled for 10 years, and high school decided I wanted my children to have that opportunity to be able, because they needed more that I couldn't give to them. So I'm grateful for the public school system, but I have some major concerns. What we just did just now, we stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance. And one nation under God. We've completely, in lots of ways, removed God from our classrooms, and we're feeling the effects of this in our world today. It's very evident. Our world, our communities, so much seems to be spiraling out of control. And if we don't, as parents, stand up and try to teach and say and defend and protect our families, our homes, and our God and this country, I don't even know if we'll recognize America in a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades from now. And I had an experience right before the end of the school year. My daughter is an Encore member at Skyview and was performing. And Mr. Lichty was very kind. I was able to speak to him about the situation. And I'm going back to this thought. I just barely watched a documentary by Matt Walsh called What is a Woman? And I would highly recommend that to you to watch that. And it's very fascinating, eye-opening to gender ideologies in our schools and what's happening, the sexualization of children in our schools. It seems like we can't help. It seems like it's coming at us. Trying to figure out how to defend and stand up for what's right. And so so this experience that my daughter had at Skyview, it was the first night of this. It was Beatlemania, and she wasn't actually one of she wasn't the one singing the song. There was different choirs, and the song that came on, All You Need Is Love, one of my good friends, her son was in this song, and they got up to sing the song, and he was a trumpet player in it. But during the song, the first thing that showed up on the back as these kids were singing was the rainbow came up on the screen as they were singing All You Need Is Love. And then after a few minutes, or after 30, 45 seconds, then the trisexual flag came up, and then the bisexual flag. So I just couldn't believe it. And many parents didn't even know what those flags stood for. And after speaking to my friends after the concert, had no idea that their son would be placed in front of these flags to sing All You Need Is Love. And it was just heartbreaking. They went and speak to the choir director in hopes that it wouldn't happen again the second night and the third night, but it happened each night. And I've just been very concerned. Sexualization of our children should not be happening in our schools, period. It's not the place. And I'm sure you would probably agree, it's not the place of the schoolhouse to do that. That is in the homes of each of those children that should be taught. And there's many families who are ready to prepare, I know, to leave the public school system if this continues or gets worse. And I hate to see that, because I think as a community we really are stronger together if we can learn to work together and realize where our places are. Anyways, I say this. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. And just in comment, please know that we are all parents and we are all grandparents of children in the same schools. Next up, we have the public hearing. Oh, first I should ask you, Heather, do you want to talk to someone here from the district? Would you like to speak to any of these people here? Or would you like someone here to get back with you about your comments?
He was very kind, said that he would, I tried to meet with the choir director, I wanted to talk to him face to face, and was never able to. So I finally just thought I'll just call Mr. Lindsay, because he's been very great to work with me. With the assembly that happened at Skyview, he's been very, very good to work with. And so he was very kind and said, oh, why did they push that button? I still remember that was a great comment. And he said, let me take care of it. And so, it was at the end of the school year, and I just kind of let it go. But I thought with the school board meeting tonight, it was worth bringing up. Because again, watching that What a Woman Is, because there's so much of gender ideology that they're expecting our children to accept and assimilate into their lives. And if you don't, you're a bigot, which is completely untrue. We're based in reality. We want our schools to teach truth and what's real. And we need to have a firm foundation of where we're going, because I just feel like our world is spinning out of control. And I want to be able to continue to support the public school system. I do, because I think there's so many great things that can happen through that modality. But parents start feeling like their children don't have a safe place to be able to hold their foundations, the one nation under God, their God-given rights and beliefs, that those things can be held sacred and not pushed upon them in a public school system. We will see an exodus of families. And so I think I'm good. Mr. Lindsay was very good. I would like to know what your thoughts are, maybe what you've seen, I guess, in other schools. All right. The last school board meeting that I came to, it was right after the assembly that had happened, and the room was full of people in rainbow shirts and rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter, and I felt very threatened. It was a very scary thing. I haven't come back since. But after this experience, I thought, what are you seeing? What are your hopes? What are you wanting? What is your vision for Cache County School District?
Well, public input is just that, public input, and we have to continue with our meeting right now. But if you'd like to have discussion or contact from any of the board members, you're welcome to email or call. Our numbers and emails are all posted on the website, or any of these gentlemen here could help you. Thank you, Mike, for answering her questions before. But we need to continue with our meeting. I just wondered if you wanted someone to talk with you right now.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
All right. Okay, moving on, we will move to the public hearing part of our meeting for the final legal budget for fiscal year 22 and 23. So if, Heather, you don't have anything to say about the budget, then I assume there's no one else who wants to talk about the budget from the public. Okay, so then we will move on to our consent agenda, and I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
My second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as printed. All those in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the consent agenda passes.
Thank you, Jared. Next up, we have our action agenda. Number one on that list is the request for approval of student services policy review, and Kurt Jenkins is here. If anyone has questions. Did you have anything you wanted to add to what you said 2 weeks ago?
Just that we had made some, I talked to Kathy, so we did make a couple of adjustments, formatting and such, and Jenda and I have been working on that.
Okay.
And I did want to add from our last, I laughed and I did text you about that when you asked if we had talked to the SROs. And they're part of the same team. We are part of that multidisciplinary, and they are part of our training. So they're well aware. We've actually been doing threat assessments for a few years now, and they're an integral part of that. So, but they don't run them. I think maybe that was maybe I didn't clarify that. That's something the schools run, and they're just a part of that.
Oh, I think my question that I asked you was if the SROs had looked at the policy at all for the threat assessment.
Reed Tanner, Sergeant Tanner, is familiar with the policy, and then we will be training all of our SROs on it in August, along with all of our administrators, counselors. Who else?
Did Sergeant Tanner have any input to give on that?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Kurt on these policies revisions? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the student services policy.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we update, retire, and create 2 new policies under the student services umbrella. Is there any discussion about that? Seeing none, we will vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the recommended policy changes for student services passes.
Thank you, Jared.
Always a suspenseful moment.
Is it?
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the approval of the business office policy for payroll procedures. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to approve the business office policy review of the payroll procedures.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded, and I do have one suggestion for this, Jared. On Section 8, it says school business leaves form must be approved by their supervisor. So there references who in that sentence? That's my question.
I would assume by the employee submitting the form, but clarify that a little bit more. Is that your suggestion?
I just think that line needs to be clarified just a bit.
Okay, you bet we can do that.
All right, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and we will vote on the payroll procedures policy review and update with the suggested corrections.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the amended payroll procedures policy with a suggested correction passes.
Thank you, Jared. Next, number 3 is the meetings of the Board of Education policy review. Is there anyone with questions on this one? After our meeting when we saw this 2 weeks ago, It was suggested that we remove 2 sections, and Emily did that for us. Thank you. Or Jenda did. Somebody did. Thanks. Any questions or comments on this one? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the meeting of the Board of Education Policy Review.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we will update the meetings of the Board of Education policy as printed. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the amendment to the Board of Education meetings policy passes.
Thank you, Jared. Next, we have the request for approval of the 2022-2023 school fees amendment for amendment number 1. Mike, did you have anything to add to this? No. Okay. Thank you for being here. Anyone have any questions for Mike? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the 2022 through 2023 school fees amendment.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2022-2023 school fees amendment number 1. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the 2022-23 school fees amendment passes.
Thank you. Was that unanimous? Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have the request for approval of school counseling program that was presented to us 2 weeks ago. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this one? All right, I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the school counseling program.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the school counseling program as printed with the data projects that they presented to us 2 weeks ago and the college and career readiness program. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the school counseling program passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next up, we have a request for approval of the tentative negotiation agreements with Cash Education Foundation, the Cash
Education Association.
Sorry, thank you. Cash Education Association, the Cash Educational Support Professionals Association, and the Administrators Association. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this one? All right, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the tentative negotiation agreements with the CEA, the Cash Educational Support Professionals Association, and the Administrators Association.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the tentative negotiation agreements with Cash Education Association, Cash Educational Support Professionals Association, and Administrators Association. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the negotiated agreements with our district associations passes.
Thank you. Was that unanimous?
Yes, unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a request for approval of the superintendent's contract. We have done an evaluation of the superintendent's work and find it to be excellent and have set goals for this next year and ask for approval to extend his contract. Is there anyone with questions or concerns on this one? All right. I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the superintendent's contract.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the superintendent's contract extension. Please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the superintendent's contract passes unanimously.
Thank you, Jared. Next, we have a request for approval of the business administrator's contract extension. We have evaluated his work for the past year and find it to be excellent and would like to extend his contract. And is there anyone with questions or concerns on this item? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the business administrator's contract.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the business administrator's contract extension. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the business administrator's contract passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next, we have a request for approval of the 2022-2023 board meeting schedule as printed. Any questions or concerns? Thanks, Emily, for fixing so many things on that. Okay, I will take a motion.
I make a motion to approve the 22-23 board meeting schedule.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2022-2023 board meeting schedule. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the 2022-23 board meeting schedule passes unanimously.
Thank you, Jared. Next up, we have a request for approval of resolution to adopt final tax rates for the tax year 2022. Any questions or concerns for Jared? All right, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the resolution to adopt the final tax rates for tax year 2022.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution to adopt the final tax rates for tax year 2022. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve a resolution to adopt final tax rates for the 2022 tax year passes unanimously.
Thank you,
And
Jared.
can I add just a note to that?
Please do.
President Rhodes, just so that it's on the record, the state basic levy, which is set at the state level, has not been set yet, and so the board has essentially approved whatever that levy comes in at with that approval.
Next, we have a request for approval of the final legal budget for fiscal year 2022.
I move that we approve the final legal budget for year 2022.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the final legal budget for fiscal year 2022. Are there any questions or concerns? Very good. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the final legal budget for fiscal year 22 passes unanimously.
Thank you, Jared. Do you have any comments to add to this one?
Would you like me to do the PowerPoint presentation now?
Yes, because that's up next anyway.
Okay.
Please do.
No additional comments, because you'll get to hear from me enough right here, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim, for getting that set up. So I'll take just a few minutes to go over some information that relates to our upcoming school year budget that is hopefully concise and somewhat interesting. I know that budgets typically are not something that gets us out of bed in the morning, but for me, that's exactly what happens. But grateful for this opportunity. I'm just going to present a few aspects of our budget, kind of an overview, a 10,000-foot overview, and show where our revenues and our expenditures come from. If there are any questions after that, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them. Also, would just briefly comment, it's fun to have at least a few members of our public here, and we're excited this fall. We're hoping to publish what's called a popular financial report. If you got on and looked at our annual financial report right now, it's about 150 pages of lots of stuff, and you may not want to read that, but this would be shorter and more consolidated and have some graphics and information that would hopefully give you a good understanding of our district finances. So maybe that's something to look forward to, but we're excited to publish that this fall. For our upcoming budget, and I've put information on this PowerPoint related to the budget that we're just finishing, as well as the budget for the upcoming year. So for our upcoming year, the assessed valuation in Cache County has actually gone up about $2 billion. That is a huge increase. You would probably recognize from just home values and understanding the real estate market that the value of properties has been going up significantly, and this just quantifies that quite specifically for the county. But we were at just above $7 billion this current year, and moving to $9 billion for the next tax year. And you'll see in just a minute that what that translates to in terms of tax rates for the school district is that our tax rate is going down quite a bit, because that allows us to generate the same amount of revenue with the higher tax valuation.
Jared, sorry, just to clarify, does this include Logan City?
This does not.
Okay.
So this, would only include the properties that pertain to the Cache County School District, but not Logan City School District. We've included legislative estimates up to June 10th. We have an estimated fall enrollment of just under 20,000. And if we have a lot of growth coming into this fall, who knows, we may hit that 20,000 mark this year. We have added 27 new teaching positions in the district. We have about 3,000 employees. That blows my mind coming from a smaller school district that we have that many employees and folks who do a great job. We run 10 funds in the school district and about 130 programs, so lots of accounting. Okay, significant impacts for the budget for the upcoming year. The legislature approved a 6% funding increase on what's called the WPU. That stands for Weighted Pupil Unit, and that's an amount of funding that is provided for each student in the state, regardless of district, etc. In our budget, we've added proportionate increases to the different funds and programs because of our increasing enrollment. Just an example of that would be if a school has 50 additional students, then we need to provide supply funding for 50 additional students to that school. As I noted earlier, we have property tax growth. There's no retirement rate increase for our employees this year, which is a good thing because we don't have to pay extra for our retirement program. Health insurance did go up just under 10%, and a cost of living increase for our employees is 5.5%. This particular budget, the fiscal year 23 budget, we still have quite a bit of funding from the federal government. I would just call it COVID funding, but it goes by these terms ESSER and GEAR funds. So we've been using that funding the last 2 years, but there are portions of those funds that will carry forward into next school year and likely the school year following as well. So those are included in our budget. We did have a significant increase to our at-risk funding, and we also had a significant decrease to our capital foundation funding. I think, Tim, we can move forward. Okay, so in summary, and if any of you are interested in a paper copy of all of this, it's on the back table there. But in summary, our initial budget for the upcoming year is just above $281 million. Again, that kind of just blows my mind, but when you're educating 20,000 students, there's a cost to making that happen. And we feel good about how we've budgeted that money, and we'll get into that in just a minute. About $270 million of that is managed at the district level. Schools manage about $8 million, and we also include in our budget the Cash Education Foundation. Although it's a separate legal entity, we're required to put the foundation finances onto our accounting books each year, so we include that in our budget, and that's about $3 million. For the year that's just ending, we actually have a higher budget, and you might say, well, why would you have a higher budget if your revenues are increasing from the state, etc.? And that's because we budget into the final budget all of the anticipated carryover amounts and deferred revenues that we'll take from the current year into the next year. And that's not the case for the upcoming year's budget. Those things have not all been budgeted in. Any questions to that point?
Did you mentioned when we have talked about the decrease in capital foundation money that you were going to try to visit with somebody at the state level or at USB, right, at their office to find out how that formula can be adjusted to allow for students in buildings and not students online to qualify, or districts with students in buildings and not students online to qualify for those capital foundation funds. Did you ever find anything out about that?
Nothing is set in motion specifically to change that formula. Superintendent Norton and I did have a conversation with the folks at the State Board of Education, and Superintendent made that point very clear that this should be for students who are in a physical building. And we intend to continue that conversation and follow up, but I'm not aware of anything beyond that at this point.
All right.
But they were amenable to that.
they recognize they got a problem.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Tim, we can move forward. Thank you. This just gives a summary of our, when we talk about those total revenues, which sources do those revenues come from? And local revenues in our upcoming budget account for just under 89 million. State, and primarily that would be property taxes, but not entirely. State revenues, 144 million. Federal, 28 million. And of that 28 million, a good chunk of that, I'm going to say maybe 10 to 15 million, includes the COVID funding that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. And then deferred revenue and or fund balances. Okay, we can move forward, Tim. All right, I wanted to talk just a little bit about tax rates and how those work and how the increase in our assessed valuation for the county affects our tax rates. So I'll compare the upcoming tax year to the current tax year on these next couple of slides. The combined basic levy is a levy set at the state level. In other words, school district has no control over what this levy is. What it's intended to do is generate a set amount of money statewide that is then distributed out to the school districts according to the WPU formula. And so this last year it was the 001661. This next year we don't know what it'll be yet, but the board just recently approved that at whatever rate it ends up being set at. But the idea would be that whatever rate it's set at would generate the same amount of money as the rate does this year, so I would expect it will be lower this next year. Charter school levy, as a public school district, we do assess a levy for charter schools. That's required by state law. And that is set at whatever the State Board of Education calculates the charter schools that are within our district boundary should receive for WPU funding. And that rate is assessed through the school district, but we don't actually receive any of that money or send it to charter schools. It goes directly to the county treasurer, and then the county treasurer will forward that money to the appropriate charter schools. But you'll see that that goes down from 5.0 to 4.1, and so that's representative of the type of rate decrease that we see this year. Locally controlled levies, I label these locally controlled because these are the levies that the school district does control. We set these levies and we determine what they should be. So those go down from 5130 to 4151, which is a pretty dramatic decrease. And again, that will be because of the increase in assessed valuation. The state's property tax system is set up so that a public entity like the school district receives the same amount of money as the previous year, regardless of what has happened to assessed valuation. So in this case where it's gone up, the property rates go down. Any questions about that from board members? Okay. On the next slide, it'll just outline those locally controlled tax rates. So we have a voted local levy, a debt service levy, which goes specifically to pay for the bonds that have been passed previously for our building projects. Capital local levy, that goes to pay for capital and building projects, not building a new school, but updating a school or renovating a school or things along that nature. And then the board local levy is listed fourth there. So those are our locally controlled levies. Any questions about those?
Why is the capital local levy going up when everything else is going down?
I mentioned, wonderful question. I was hoping someone would notice that. So I mentioned previously that we received quite a decrease in the capital foundation funding from the state. So in shaking out our budget and determining how we would supplement that funding in the capital fund, we were able to make things work in our general fund while transferring some of our tax rate to capital for this purpose. And so that's why you see that. It's not a tax increase because what that means is that we decrease the voted local and board local levies below what we could have had them at for this year to compensate for that, so they even out. Does that make sense, what I explained? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I was going to say, I think that went the other way, but maybe I added in a double slide there. All right. Just looking at our state revenues, because this is state revenues, as you saw earlier, provide the majority of our budget, just about half of our total budget. And this just gives an idea of what we receive from some of the different state funding programs. Regular program K through 12, when I mentioned the WPU earlier, or the weighted pupil unit, this is the funding that we receive through the WPU. And then we receive voted guarantee and board guarantee monies. These come through the tax rates that we set, that we just mentioned, the voted levy and the board levy. The state guarantees that each district will receive a certain amount for those levies, and because generally speaking our district is lower in assessed valuation per student than other districts, we get additional funding from those two sources, which is super helpful to our district. Professional staff, special ed, CTE, etc. You can read down through there. Are there any questions on any of those revenues?
I have one question. Because of the cost of gas, is there going to be some help for the pupil transportation, or does that not happen?
It's so easy to predict the cost of gasoline right now that we've got it nailed down. Yeah, we did build in some extra for fuel expenses in this year's budget. Yes, whether that ends up being enough or way too much, that'll be for a few months down the road to determine. But yes, we built some extra in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, this is a similar slide to the last one, but just with federal revenues, just to give an idea of our main ongoing sources of federal revenue. IDEA, which contributes to our special ed programs. IDEA preschool, which is essentially special ed preschool funding, but it cannot be used for K-12, so we get an amount there. No Child Left Behind, this consolidates several federal programs that we receive funding for in the district. And then School Food Services, as a loan program, is actually our highest federal revenue program in the district. You might ask, again, why do we budget $3 million more in the current year than in next year? That's because during the last couple of years, the federal government has reimbursed every meal, and every student has qualified for those meals. That program goes away this next year, so we anticipate going back to what our program ran at a couple of years ago. Okay, and budgeted expenditures by category for the upcoming year, and this just shows, where do we spend our money, where does it go towards as a full budget. And you'll see that just under 70% goes to salaries and benefits for employees. And then we have a few other categories. Supplies and materials stands out. Most of our budgets, if there's an area that we're unsure of where it's going to be spent at this moment in time, then we'll put that budget in supplies. And so it gathers a little bit more than normal. And also all of the ESSER and GEAR, the COVID funding that we're carrying forward, a lot of that is budgeted in the supplies until we know more specifically what we'll use it for. Debt service stands out, and that the $19 million gives you an idea of the amount of money that we pay annually to repay our bonds for the buildings that we've built over the last few years. Any questions on any of those categories?
Since Esser and Gare money is one-time money, and we're trying to stretch it out over the course of a few years, does that mean, because it's in supplies and materials, does that mean that we are not using Esser and Gare to pay any salaries or?
We are paying some salaries from Esser and Gare, not everything though. So when I say a lot of it is in salaries, it's some of those programs, until you really start diving into the details of what you're going to do year to year, it's hard to know exactly where to budget the money. So in that case, if we're not sure, we just put it in supplies, and that's what I was indicating. But we do have salaries and benefits in those programs, and the program directors for each program are should have and are planning ways to transition that salary once that funding goes away.
Does that mean we'll have to RIF some people, some employees, because they're being paid with one-time money?
I would think not. I mean, I think the general philosophy of any public entity is to not RIF folks unless there's a real emergency. So my expectation, and without knowing what each program director is discussing, is that people have been hired with either on the basis that they know they're only going to be working for a year or two or three and understand up front that their employment ends at that time, or there's another funding source that they're anticipating moving that position to.
Okay, thank you.
Gary and Tim could give you,
Yeah, you can clarify that.
want to get it clarified.
So a lot of this money.
But you need to talk into the microphone.
I'm sorry. There's people online. We were a little different than most districts in how we expended the money, and why we planned it out over 3 years is because we wanted the bulk of the money to go toward student services in the form of after-school and summer school programs. And a lot of those programs are run by staff we already have employed. And so when the money is no longer there, those staff will just go back to their regular salaries but still be employed full-time. There's a couple of exceptions in there where, for example, our program directors that oversee running those summer and after-school programs that are in all of our schools, those monies will dry up for them, and but they're classroom teachers. We can move back into the classroom if so needed. So there's a few positions like that that we have built in that we can absorb and move people back into classrooms, since we hire about 100 teachers in a year. So
The intent of those programs, catch people up.
yeah, catching students up who lost ground during COVID. Right now, for example, in the secondary schools, we're doing credit recovery for a number of students. We have more students behind in credit due to the COVID issues that we've faced over the last 2 years than we've seen. And then Gary and his folks are doing some pretty intensive programming in both the after school and summer school programs, and seeing some really good gains there with the students. So I think we're going to come out better on at least the elementary level, is what I predict, because this extra money is helping us to help kids in those times where we would have had a little summer slide, or to augment their education after school.
All right. Anybody else have questions for Tim? Thank you very much.
And one other quick note I just wanted to make at the bottom of this slide. There's a category called Miscellaneous, and to not give a wrong impression there, the labels that I use for these different categories are the labels that the State Board of Education sets up for districts to use for accounting purposes. So while it says miscellaneous, items that are in that category are actually more specific than that. For example, we'd have dues and fees in that category. We would have our lease payments for our solar and energy projects that we're doing right now. So the state uses it as a catch-all category, but it doesn't mean that it's money that we've just kind of thrown out there for whatever. It's budgeted specifically. I've never liked the miscellaneous designation there, but we follow what we're given. Okay, Tim, I think there's one more. This is the same information, but for the current year that we're ending. And you'll see that in most of the budget categories, we're spending similar percentages of the total budget. Any questions on any of those?
Does transportation fall under miscellaneous then?
It depends on the transportation expense. So, for example, all of the salaries and benefits would fall under the salary and benefit categories. Fuel is, if you look at the numbers to the side there, fuel is 624 code, so it would fit in supplies and materials actually. If they were to purchase a piece of equipment, that would fit under property. So it's not, transportation would be spread throughout all of these categories. Okay, and then just to summarize by fund, I mentioned earlier that we have 10 funds in the district, only 8 carry revenues and expenditures. The other 2 funds, we just use fund balance accounts. I assume nobody cares a whole lot about that, but I can show those to anybody who would like to see them at any time. But this just shows the different funds that we have. General is by and far the biggest fund that we operate. Student activities would be money that the schools manage, plus the fund balance that they would be carrying over. Tax increment, that has to do with our, again, the amount that goes to charter schools and also our lease payments. The debt service levy is what we pay off our bonds with. Capital projects is specific to our building needs. School food services, I think, is self-explanatory. And then we have a separate fund for our health insurance and a separate fund for the Cash Education Foundation. And all of those are budgeted and accounted for individually.
So, Jared, if health insurance is going up almost 10% in the next fiscal year, then how can the budget be lower, the dollar amount be lower in 23 than 22?
So we carried, and the health insurance fund includes both our medical and dental. We self-fund both of those programs. Coming into 2022, we carried in about, I believe it was $2.8 million.
Oh, okay.
Coming into 23, we're not anticipating having that $2.8 million. So in reality, there's a $3 million difference there, but because we've budgeted that $2.8 million into the fiscal year 22 amount, they appear to be similar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And that is all. Any questions?
I feel like I should clap. Nice work. Anyone have questions for Jared? Thank you so much for making it easy to understand. So I will take a motion to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023 as explained by Jared.
I move that we approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023. All in favor, please vote.
Voting is closed, and the motion to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 23 passes unanimously.
Thank you, Jared. For the last 3 items on the agenda. That is the end of our action agenda. We'll move on to our reports agenda and hear about TSSA plans from Tim Smith.
I can move the mouse all the way from over here. Okay. So TSSA plans are ready for your review, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute on how you get to them and how you review them. But I just want to give you a couple of reminders on TSSA and a couple of points. So the Teacher, Student, and Success Act, we're going into our 4th year of implementation. Just to remind you, those are funds that the state legislature allocated 3 years ago for schools as discretionary money that schools can expend to meet their local needs without it going through district hands before it gets to them. And those funds have been growing significantly. They're comparable to the amount of funds that our schools all get for trust lands, so it's essentially doubled the amount of discretionary funds that our schools get. So I think in Jared's budget you saw $8 or so million that are out in the schools being used, and that a lot of those are represented by the school trust land and TSSA. So just to give you an idea of how significantly those funds are going up each year, last year we were funded $3,639,000 and change. And this year, those funds were allocated were $4,472,000 and change. So that's an increase of about $832,000 for our schools. So you won't see that because you don't see a comparison when you go through and approve the plans. So I emailed all of you a sheet to your district account. I had them printed to give you a printed copy today, but I left that in my printer when I headed down here from the other district office. So basically, if you'll log into your Google account for the school district to your Chromebook, you'll find what I emailed you in your email, and then if you just go to that, print it out, or look at it online, it'll walk you through. But basically, you go to your drive, and when you get into drives, if you look on the screen there, you'll see shared drives. There's My Drive and Shared Drive. And if you click on Shared Drives at the very bottom, there's a folder called TSSA. And you'll see the 4 folders for the 4 years that we have implemented TSSA. You'll just to remind you that one of the requirements for the school district is to set a framework for how those funds are expended. We did set that up in 2019, and we did modify it this last year in 2021. So if you want, before you review the plans, it'd be really good for you as a board member just to open this District Guidelines 2021 and review what those categories are. So as you look through the plans, you have a frame of reference on what our framework looks like. The plan board review instructions are right there too. In addition to being emailed to you, you can find them right here. So if I take you, if you open the 22-23 folder, here's all 25 of our schools. And you'll notice they all say ready to review. I just got the last school in about 2 hours ago. So we've got those all ready for you to review. I believe all 7 of you have a list of schools that you've divided up that you'll review. When you go into a school, I'll just show you that really quickly. So this is Birch Creek Elementary in Smithfield. You'll see the allocation of $109,683 for Birch Creek Elementary. This is the summary sheet, so you'll see 5 tabs down here on the bottom, a summary tab, and 4 goal tabs. And so each school will set between 1 and 4 goals. They don't have to have 4 goals. They have to have at least 1 goal. Most of them have 2 or 3. Some of them have 4 goals. And this is a summary of how their requesting to spend those funds. And then if you click on each goal tab at the bottom, it'll give you a description for the goal, how they'll measure success, what their action plan is, and then specifics on what that is. And so this first tab on almost all the elementary schools, because all of them decided to spend their money on a school counselor, help with a school counselor. So you'll see this $17,000 what they've allocated to go towards a school counselor. And Gary, you may want to, that was the same as last year, and I don't know if they accounted for their salary increase, so you may want to remind them of that. Okay, very good. And then so Birch Creek probably has a couple of other goals. Here's a math goal, for example, and they don't have a third goal, so they're spending their monies in focusing on math right now. If you want, as a board member, to comment on anything and ask the principal a question, you would just right-click on any of the cells, drop down here to comment, type your comment in here. I don't understand how this money's being expended, or could you answer this question? And they'll get that comment and can respond to that. So
will you repeat that again? Where did you go to get the comment?
Just all you do is right click on any cell with your mouse, and you can add a comment in there. Once you've gone through those, we'll bring them back to the board for approval. And then we're hoping to do that in July, and then the schools can begin to expend those funds for the next school year.
So you want us to be ready to, or to be finished reviewing these?
Yeah. Do you have one board meeting or two in July?
The one board meeting in July is on the 20th.
Yeah, that would be perfect. If you think you can get those done by the 20th, that would be fabulous.
Well, we'll try and get them done before that, but
okay. Yeah, a week before would be good. That'll give Gary and I a chance to go through and see what your comments were and explain on any of those, kind of clarify what your questions are.
Okay.
Any questions on TSSA?
Anyone have a question for Tim?
I would just add that these are valuable funds for our school districts, and you'll notice as you read through these plans some great things going on in our schools when they have discretion over this amount of money. It's been difficult for them the last year, so when we get our carryover in July, we imagine that there'll be quite a bit of additional funding available for them this next year that carried over. We just can't get products, so if they wanted to purchase technology, that's been difficult this year. It's been with our low unemployment rate in Cache Valley. It's been actually hard for them to hire individuals when they have maybe written an aid or something into their plan. That's been very difficult as well. So it's been a challenging year that way, but hopefully some of that will start to rebound.
It's interesting how many of those plans for elementaries are now including aids in math classes. And I think that the student performance shows the effect of that. Because they've been including those for the last 2-3 years or so.
We also started just this year with math facilitators, like we've had reading facilitators for years now. This is our first year with some math facilitators to give those paraprofessionals, those aides in the math classes, a little more direction. So that's been another step that we've taken. And that money came out of that at-risk budget that Jared talked about earlier.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions?
We're still taking the 25% off the top.
Oh, yes.
So in case you add up all the numbers.
Yeah, there's two things that are taken off the top. One is the 25% salary augmentation that districts are allowed by statute to take off. And everyone's well aware of that, schools and teachers. And And then in addition, all the schools agreed to take off a small amount to help us fund some ELL support at the school district level. So that's, we have an individual at the school district that acts as a parent liaison, speaks Spanish, can reach out and interact with those families and help them.
Is this the second or third year for that ELL support through TSSA?
I think we've been doing that from the beginning, so this is the fourth. We're going into our fourth year of that support.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So is the, do we see that being effective for the families who need that help so much?
You can speak to that better than I can.
Absolutely. So that money actually started as an FTE. The first year it actually went to South Cache. We were short one EL teacher, and so that money went there. This is our second year of having the liaison that you're speaking of. I talked with a group just today about the gal that we have doing that is having families come in, and not only is she helping them get ready for school in our district, but she's even taking the younger kids and finding preschools for them and helping them register. She has a cell phone that runs way into the evening. Her hours go till 9 or 10 o'clock at night sometimes, because that's when those families are off work and can make that phone call to her. And then she schedules to bring those families into the district and help them out. But it's a two-way street. Also, our principals or teachers can call her and say, hey, I've got something very important I need this family to know, and I just have a hard time communicating with them, and she'll make the call to them. So it works both ways, and that has been very beneficial. Our families have spoken very highly of that, and we have seen quite a difference.
So that sounds like a heavy load for one person to carry. Is one person enough for that?
It is right now. We actually lost the person that we hired a year ago. She just left us here a few weeks ago. And as we looked at that position, we actually raised the salary just a little because she found other employment. But she did want to try that other employment, so she chose to leave us anyway. But as we hired our new person, we did raise that salary just a little so that we could draw a confident and competent person to do that. The fun story behind that, the background is she's one of our previous Cache County School District graduates. She went on, she now has a college degree, and now she's working for us in this capacity. And she's very capable, and she's been on the job about 3 weeks now and loving it.
Awesome.
So, and is able at this moment to be able to do that, but it's something we're watching closely to see if we need to increase that or not.
Thank you.
We do have schools hiring parent liaisons to work with all parents. Some of them are using their ESSER money, some of them are using their TSSA money in the secondaries, just for that same reason. So they have some outreach with parents who are struggling in whatever way.
So how do we help? I assume that not all our ELL students are Spanish speaking.
The majority are, but yes, you're right. Not all of them.
So how do we help those few, the small group who is not Spanish speaking native?
We have it. Yeah, we've invested in.
Yeah, we've invested. We have a program that has, I don't know how many languages, 30 different languages that we've contracted with. And we make a phone call to them. They find someone who can speak that language for us, get back to us, and then they become our go-between, our interpreter, as we work with those other families.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions on TSSA and the sidetracks that we just took?
No, thanks for putting all that material together, Tim.
No problem.
Okay, Jared, you're up next. Again, monthly financial report.
I feel like I've spoken enough already. For the May financial report, I provided school board members with a copy of our revenue and expenditure reports for May. Just as a summary of that, as of the end of May, the district has received $209 million in revenues and expended $178. One of the big financial highlights for May, in my mind, was that we were able to finalize bond refunding of a portion of our 2014 bonds. So these bonds were originally sold at about 5%, and we were able to refund at under 2%. And so the actual savings, I know I told you last month we were looking at about $700,000, but it ended up being about $825,000. And I'm just excited about that because it positions our district better going forward. A bond refunding, if any of you are wondering, is very similar to refunding your home, just at a lower interest rate and maybe restructuring your payments. So we do that on a district level for bonds that we've used for building buildings, and that saves us almost $1 million from that transaction. So excited to have that finished up.
Especially since it was just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't be able to do that anytime soon, I guess.
Oh, even right now, we probably would not have any savings. So it was in the nick of time.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. Any board member reports? Anyone?
Just a reminder that our board party will be on the 20th after our meeting. And I'll just send out an email to remind everybody before the 20th. And if you want to volunteer to help with salads, side dishes, etc., I'll ask for that at that time as well.
Thank you for that reminder. Anyone else? Okay, moving on, the board president report. I would just like to remind you all to log in on the USBA website and complete as many things as you can on the Master Board Certification Program, specifically open meeting law, because legally we have to review that law yearly. And there may be another resolution in next year's legislative session recognizing the school boards that earn the Master Board recognition as a board. And legislators are paying attention to that when that comes up. So I really would like us to be on that list.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Okay, so if you've done all 4 of the assignments, the 4 years, then you could just go back and redo at whatever
On
year
4,
you want?
you do 4.
So if I did year 1 again, then I do year 2? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And thank you all. This has been sort of a marathon, 2 months between school meetings and graduations and 3 board meetings in June. I appreciate all your help. You can have a few weeks off until the 20th of July. And we'll move to the superintendent.
Yeah, and I don't really have much to report except that if you ever ask what we do during the summer, tonight's meeting might be an indication that you'd have some things to talk about. The school year ends, but the district office kicks into high gear during the early part of the summer and especially all of August, just to make sure we're ready. So I get that question all the time.
So do I. So does that mean school is done, so all of the board members just take a vacation for 3 months?
I don't think that's what I said.
No, we get that question too, just like you do.
Yeah.
Although you probably get it more often than we do because most people don't know who their school board member is. Any comments from district personnel? Thank you all for being here. We appreciate all that you do. And thank you for those who have come to visit us from public. And thank you to our state school board representative, Jenny Earle. We appreciate you being here. And fun to see you in our board meeting. And reaching the end of our agenda, we will adjourn.
So is this Mike's last meeting that he's going to be here for?